keep it there, and then we can go live so that we don't take any more chances. So we're back to John. We're back to Tuan Haji starting, then seconded by Michael, and then followed by Joanne. Yeah. Thanks. And then we go into a question Q&A session.
Okay, can. Yeah, you may start anytime now.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to our Malaysian Urban Forum session. That is today. It's hosted by the Malaysian Institute of Planners, together with Placemaking Malaysia, which is a fledgling organization under Malaysian Institute of Planners. We hope to be launching it soon. My name is Lee Jiaping. I am your moderator for today. I'm representing Placemaking X. I'm a board member of Placemaking X, as well as a interim committee member of Placemaking Malaysia. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this session called The Roles That Public Spaces Play in Times of Crisis. And we have three very distinguished speakers here with us today. They are Tuan Haji Isan, the president of Malaysian Institute of Planners. We also have joining us from Brisbane, Michael Stott, who's the director and urban designer and strategic planner at Urbanice Australia. And also in closing, last but not least, the Rose Among the Thorns is Joanne Munn, who is a community lead with Kebun Kebun Bangsa and Kerinci. So we will start off with presentations by the moderator, starting off with Encik Ihsan, and then we will keep the questions and answers right at the end. For those members who are in the room, would you be able to put your questions onto the public chat? And then I will note them down and we will share them at the Q&A session right at the end. So without further ado, I'd just like to introduce Town Planner Tuan Haji Ihsan Zainal Mokhtar, President and Malaysian Institute of Planners, otherwise known as MIP. Tuan Haji has more than 25 years of experience as an urban planner, both in government and private sector. He has been managing his own practice in the field of urban planning, urban design, and planning research since 2000. His involvement in the field of urban planning and design has taken him to many conferences where he has presented papers in the field, focusing on land use and planning issues. He's also been involved in the research planning for the Kuala Kangsar District 2010-2020, which was mainly to develop business and strategic implementation plan for urban design, conservation of heritage buildings and landscape. For the Perlis State Government Study Plan 2009 to 2030. He's also been helping them develop tourism management and implementation on land use. So without further ado, Tuan Haji, please, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Jiaping. This is an interesting topic, the fact that we're talking about public spaces. But before we move to that area, we would like to have an understanding among us that public spaces is also an important part of public spaces can be public places. So we all share this space, and then I think more recently we found out that with COVID-19, it is a disaster at the city level, the national level, worldwide level. A lot of things have changed, and how do we cope with this? How does public space and design cope with the challenges that we are facing? So among the things that I think, just a quick run through, first slide, please. We noticed that I think it's important that public spaces or even is to be or can be used for multi-use, and that makes a place more resilient. I think we have, when I first came across this, I read about what happened in China. They were very proud that they managed to build a hospital in 10 days. And then there was another news article about how the British government managed to change their halls into hospitals. But what was more incredible, actually, what we did in Malaysia was to change the Malaysian Agriculture Exhibition Center into a hospital within less than a week. I think it was days. So we're looking at how do we use these kind of spaces in light of crisis. Jan? Now, this is another quick example of, strangely enough, or in contradictory, people that were homeless were given homes, because the concept in COVID was that we need people not to be too close to each other and not to be on the streets. So this kind of temporary shelter not only can be used during COVID, but during disasters. And actually, we have always used public schools and fields. So we have to look back into that, schools, of how we can accommodate when any disaster actually occur. So this kind of things have been happening. Actually, we can learn from the Japanese city, and this example was applicable under COVID-19, because of course COVID changed completely the way how we do things, the need for us to be resilient, and the need for us to be very adaptable. Yeah. Now, we also have to realize that during crisis, and when you ask to stay home, to stay at home, people need people. I think that's an important thing that we should bear in mind. So the idea of we saw this picture in Italy and in certain cities where they sang and they encouraged the frontliners, and they kind of talk to each other and they perform on the balcony. So we realized that the role that public spaces play to connect between your private space in your homes and the public space, and the fact that you can see another human being, the fact that you need to be together. So these are things that we do need to consider, and I think to a certain extent, the cities have adapted well, but there are certain things that we really need to do to look at the legislations, for example, and how we design things. Next. All right, I think my fellow moderator Joanne will talk more, but even urban farming, I live near one in Section 8 Shalam. So urban farming used to be an area in the electrical pylon. It's done very well. They have a small lake besides there. Because it's been so successful that then you start sharing it for free. So it provides a space for the community to get together to work on it. It's been going on for many years, even before COVID-19. So the idea is whatever they plant, they will share with the community. So I think urban farming is probably one of the way forward, and I think Joanne will share her experience in that sense. Okay, Joanne, yeah. All right, signages plays a very important role in times of crisis. I'm sure most of us have seen this. In case of fire, you're supposed to gather at one place. It's easier to manage people, but the car that's parked on the left, the blue car, these are procedures, and the public must learn quickly. That's already a culture in many areas that you park your car rearwards inside, so that in case of any impending emergency, you can leave the area in an orderly manner. So these are part of the message that we have to tell our people, and we have to tell the public that they have to get used to. So signages play an important role in leading public in times of crisis. Where you go to, where is the nearest emergency, who do you go and talk to. So we had this kind of like fire drill before, but I think the role of the public space in this time of crisis becomes more urgent, long term, short term, mid term, and it's a lifestyle that we all have to adjust. Okay, can you see next one? Next. Right. So there was our Prime Minister this morning mentioned about getting public space, and I think, like I said, signages and putting this message across is very important for the public to understand the crisis that the country is facing. As for now, the public space can also be very informative of what's happening, because current technology will allow people to look at these big billboards and electronic signages beside the earlier signages that I showed. So it's very important that we use and realize the role that this public space play in getting people to behave in a certain way. But of course, like when there are times when flooding occurs, these are other crises that can face the nation or can face cities, which I think again during the launch we were talking about 80% of the world becoming urbanized. So that's where the concentration of people are. But we should never forget that ultimately, that 20% balance of the people will be staying on 80% of the Earth's surface. So when we look at public spaces, we have also always to bear in mind the spaces outside of our cities that have a role to play. Jen, please. Okay, this is just an example that I came across in Denmark, where, as you can see, people are playing ice and hockey during preparation. It's a public space, lots of fun, sunny, but when it rains and it floods, it is used as a detention pond or retention pond. So this concept of multi-use space is very important for us planners and designers to consider when we design public spaces. Okay, next, right, we have an example here. Again, a space which is used during time of heavy rainfall to be stored temporarily and to allow it to be used like for normal activities during summer. So we have to, for a planner, I think one of the roles that we need to consider is the multi-use of space for recreation and also for crisis management. Yeah. Now, we have a lot of indoor stadiums. We have a lot of walkways and pathways and open spaces, football fields that we definitely have to think and design and look at it as potentially an area. So I think when we design a space, we tend to look at its one single use. So we always have to be thinking when we provide facilities that have to be ready just in case anything happens. So we have that basic infrastructure in terms of schools. It has always been used in Malaysia, but we should also be looking at stadiums, indoor, outdoor, football fields, recreational walkways, 5-foot path, and other public spaces. We have to make it more comfortable. We have to make it easily accessible to necessary aid and help from everyone. So, Japeng, thank you very much. I think that would be my opening remark. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was very interesting. I think that before we look at questions and answers, and because we still have time, Tuan Haji, what has been some of the single most challenging issue that you have faced or MIP has faced with regards to getting public spaces open during MCO?
Of course, so I think we read about the doctor who was jogging, in the park, and he was told off by the authorities. I think in the beginning we weren't sure of that understanding of COVID itself. But I think challenge that we face. And once there was a better understanding, I think one of the things that the authorities did was to allow us to actually use the open space just to keep our social distancing, allow us to cycle. And I've yet to see, but I think there is a correlation between people being able to be in an open space and the stress level that they have. So I think as at MIT and as planners, we are still advocating when people talk about new normal, Japing, a lot of good things that we have done. It just needs a little bit of social distancing and discipline. So I think there's many good things that we need to still push forward in our agenda in making public spaces more usable.
I'm really looking forward to that. I think that when the MCO first hit, which is the lockdown, and MCO stands for Movement Control Order, Michael. And what had happened was people weren't sure. There was lack of communication. Some councils around the world in our placemaking international discussions were thinking of still building roads. It was like almost surreal because some people were still business as usual. Oh, let's build some roads. And we were in the middle of the crisis. And some people like Mitch Silver from the New York Commissions of Park were saying, no, let's keep these parks open because we know that public spaces and the use of them contribute to mental health as well as physical health. So I'm interested in knowing what's happening in Brisbane and also Australia. So before I introduce Michael to take the floor, I'd just like to just tell you what he's been doing. So he is an urban designer and strategic planner who has spent the last 20 plus years working on projects around the world with extended periods in Australia, Asia, Canada, Europe, and Middle East. So Michael is no stranger to Asia and its context. Michael's diverse professional experience includes working for several leading global recognized consultancies and government entities at the forefront of changing how cities are designed and planned. So Michael focuses on creating compelling, place-led design solutions and delivering projects that work to increase the quality of life of community residents, whether through strategic planning and policy development, individual site design, or large-scale master plans, urban design for new transportation corridors, or the design of a community park or intimate urban plaza. So I'm really looking forward to listening to what Michael has to say about the public spaces that he's involved in or in the places that he's living in right now. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Ping. I'm just going to share my screen and hope it works. Okay. And you see here.
Yep, we're seeing it.
Okay, let me switch the display. Perfect. So thanks for having me. I think what's interesting, and I'm going to try to do a little zoom around the world, some of the spaces that I've seen and been following, and really just provide some reflections on what I've seen happening around the world. And one of the things that one of the main conclusions that I've drawn since probably March of this year is that there's kind of two clear things for me. And one is that the health of our cities is directly linked to the health and well-being of its residents, and relatedly, that the quality of life within cities is directly related to and affected by access to public spaces. So the role of public spaces in times of crisis is quite an important topic right now globally, because we're really shining a light on it, if you like. And so when we look at these public spaces in times of crisis as an asset, we can see that they're really essential, and we saw it just in the previous presentation, the rapid kind of changing of space for use in healthcare, food and resource distribution, but also when we design really truly public spaces, we need to make sure that we're designing them to be flexible so that and multifunctional and adaptable, so that in times of crisis, we can support alternative uses. And it really gets down to this idea that the most successful public spaces are ones which are multidimensional, have different programming abilities for different times, and can really be used in different ways at different times of the year. And also that they support, of course, livelihood for people as well, because as we know, a lot of parks around the world actually are where people make their living in different ways. So in Australia here, at the peak of the pandemic, much like everywhere else in the world, restaurants were closed, cafes were closed, cinemas were closed. All major events are still actually canceled now. I mean, we're all getting used to this new online way of doing things, but really since March, even all non-essential travel for meetings have been canceled. Normally I would be happily sitting alongside you guys there and taking part, but it's really, the restrictions have been quite sweeping. As an island nation ourselves, we really had to lock things down. And so many of these restrictions are actually still in place today, which is how we've been dealing with the second wave. I'm sure some of you have followed along what's been happening in Melbourne and Victoria, and to a lesser extent in Sydney. But these measures have been quite significant and not without their social and economic challenges. And, you know, as I'm sure you guys are also used to, it's also really in the early months, much like everywhere else, this widespread panic buying, because people, the use and the way things were communicated in the information was, one minute it was a panic, one minute it wasn't, and it really, the messaging was quite confusing. So of course, in our grocery stores all around the country, we saw the lack of key supplies being available. And interestingly, when we went into lockdown a second time in Melbourne, it actually happened again. So again, there was this mass kind of miscommunication of what was going on and what was expected. So, you know, of course, these aren't unique to Australia, and they've been echoed in cities around the world. But one commonality that I think we've all seen is this global absence of life on the street, and the effect that it's had on small businesses, which rely on local footfall and tourist dollars. City streets that were, you know, once so wonderfully busy and full of these serendipitous encounters, which make urban life so wonderful, have been desolate, and even now they are still. And so really the point here is that people bring life to cities, and people bring cities to life. They interact, work, socialize, travel. Without this, cities are just a collection of buildings and infrastructure. In our modern cities too, our public spaces represent our shared values. They're a common asset, owned and maintained, at least viewed as owned by all members of society. And the outbreak of coronavirus really, and its immediate impacts with social distancing, have raised a lot of important questions, I think, about the role public space has played during coronavirus and likely through any future pandemics. So it's this idea that we connect to cities by developing a sense of place. This concept describes how we perceive and attach ourselves to places through their use. So how we use places often is how we ascribe value to them. And so our connections with cities, although it changes over time, it is always grounded in this sense of place, which is why when we describe cities, we always describe the places within them. And so COVID-19 has has been disrupting this sense of place in cities all over the world, and daily parts of city life, like shared sitting, busy trains, and eating out, have suddenly become threatening. And urban dwellers around the world have been actively redefining their sense of place in response to our new perceptions and priorities. And we now, you know, there's this thought that we may not view public spaces the same post-pandemic that we did before. And so you see, again, these are pictures from where I'm from here, and these restrictions really have uprooted how we interact, not only with each other, but with others in public spaces. And the intense monitoring and scrutiny of public space and how it's used, although in many cases we've called it temporary, it does raise really important questions about the future and leaves me to wonder, once this is all over, what will public space look like when we return to our normal everyday life? And so the dramatic shifts we've seen in the use and policing of public space, I think have forever changed how we will relate to each other in these spaces. within this, of course, it means that it's doubly important now more than any time before. I think that we should be looking at innovative ways to encourage social interaction. And we saw how we went from the immediate context of social versus physical distancing, because the social distancing was having such a negative connotation and a negative effect on how we related to each other. And this great example in Bristol of how they tried to humanize it a bit more. And so the point here is really that it's in times of crisis that it's especially important that we look at the role of place and how cities respond to a crisis through the use of place, through intervention, innovation, that are done so in a way that creates supportive social and economic activity, while also maintaining the role of what we need the spaces to do during the crisis. So on a more local level, in my own park here, it's been great to see the vibrancy that's been created, particularly as we see them filled at different times of days with different people doing different things, new street stalls that have opened up. And it's especially entertaining to see all of my neighbors maintaining their gym routines in public spaces, attaching their elastic bands to light posts and carrying their free weights around from the trunk of their car into the park and in shopping trolleys, or even people moving their fitness equipment from inside their houses into their gardens. And so I've seen a few treadmills in people's driveways, which is quite interesting too. But really, it's about adapting to this use of public space and in a different context. And it's also provided us with this opportunity to reflect, I think, deeply on our relationship with our local environment. And by local environment, I mean our immediate local environment. We were confined here in Australia to a 2-kilometer radius of our homes for exercise and walking. And what we did start to see, because people were so in need of that human contact, is streets started to come alive with people using and taking over the public space. And scenes all over the country and indeed all over the world, these new patterns of use have started to emerge in the public realm. Around my neighborhood, the colorful chalk drawings have been awesome. We've seen people, when the kids have played for long afternoons to entertain themselves, have done pictures, but they've also done these really nice messages, I think, and really letting people know that we're all here for each other and that everything will be okay. But then we've also seen these really awkward queues outside supermarkets on narrow footpaths, and we've seen the juxtaposition of that with friends meeting on street corners with a drink while maintaining their physical distancing. And streets just being colonized general, I think, with people in my neighborhood sharing homemade food, plant cuttings. My neighbor keeps giving me cuttings from her garden, which has been great. But also informal little libraries have sprung up all over my neighborhood. And so it's been really heartening, you could say, or it's been really lovely to see how people, although pulled apart, have really come together. And what that's also done, though, you can see here in this map of New York, is really shown us the inequitable access to public space. And so what do you do if there is no park nearby? What if your home is tiny and there's no outdoor space, limited light? What if your community is the people you meet through going out in your community, your local community center, which is now closed? And so this has led to, I think, a global increased focus on equity in public space as maybe public space, better said, as a key spatial justice issue, because not every home has that access to green space. And important, I think, too, is that not all green space is equal in terms of design, programming, and quality. So the quality of our outdoor environment and the right to equitable access to open space, I don't think has ever been so important in our time. And what's come out of that really in a lot of areas is, with these dramatic decreases in car traffic, streets around the world have been repurposed as walkable and playful spaces. And people are starting to realize, hey, wait a minute, what is important to me in these public spaces? And pop-up cycle lanes have been a common urban response, certainly in Australia, but around the world. And what's also been remarkable with this, of course, is the decrease in air and noise pollution in urban centers, especially, which are, of course, very welcome and a kind of a nice byproduct of this. So an important determinant then about our expectations about public space access and ownership is that the informal sense of ownership we feel, I think has really come into play here, and it's enabled certain users to have greater access to it, but also shone a light, as I mentioned, on people with a lack of access to it. And so as we look through kind of what to do, we're seeing some unique approaches globally. The picture here in terms of who owns the city, this is in New Zealand, where I think it's the world's first, but it's the world's first tactical urbanism fund for taking back ownership of the city. And it's been incredibly successful, where we've seen tactical urbanism as an approach to new bicycle lanes, footpath widening, pop-up interventions, and this has then spurred on other interventions as well. Closer to home here in Australia, the Streets as Shared Spaces program has kicked off in New South Wales and in Sydney, which is really specific one-off grant funding to support local councils and communities to pilot new and innovative ideas. And so these really focus on creating projects that reallocate streets and spaces for people as a priority, whether it's walking, cycling path, or just turning pavement into plazas and providing pop-up parklets. And just generally a sense of it's a fund to really form to fund trialing of innovative ideas, which has been really exciting and people have really gone on to. In New York, we've seen similar things. I really love this photo because it was really, this one is about looking at innovative ways to reactivate streets so that children weren't left out of the process or old people left out of the process. So this was about creating safe environments where people can socialize and have fun and really get people out onto the streets in a unique way. Also in New York, we saw, I think it's only in the last couple of days, where they've announced, de Blasio, the mayor, has announced that the Open Streets and Restaurants Initiative will now remain a permanent feature of New York, which is super exciting. And really what COVID-19 and then the response around the world, what it's done is it's taken approaches like tactical urbanism and really given them the space to breathe and really come into their own, and shown just how important they are as a resource to quickly reconfigure and turn underutilized public spaces into much loved places. We see it in Rotterdam as well, where all restaurant owners have been allowed to set up parklets in front of their businesses for free, even with funding and grants available to help them survive during COVID-19. Heading back to New York, we saw the meatpacking district from the Business Improvement Association turn it into a 3-day festival where they really took over the street. And so, like I said, it's been really interesting to see what temporary and tactical urbanism have been doing. And of course, these aren't even new approaches. They've been around since the 80s, and we've used it as a technique in cities around the world to help generate long-term social and economic outcomes for communities. And I think what it's showing us is that it really is about creating vitality of street scenes, vitality of place, and using these as spaces as places where community groups can get together and kind of come together in a physically distanced way, but really come together as a group and actually spend time together. And I think it's really been about maximizing the public benefit of spaces which were previously neglected. So I think, and it also shows too that our cities and urban spaces are full of this latent potential, that we look at things every day and we take them for granted. And what it's shown us during COVID is just how flexible those spaces can be. In Toronto, I wanted to show this image as well, mostly just because I think what's shown here in the graffiti is how quickly the urban art scene, and urban art is very important in terms of placemaking, and how you see urban art almost overnight starting to reflect our current reality. And so as a point in time, I think it's been really interesting to see how other aspects of the city have responded to coronavirus and COVID-19 and in terms of creating new types of urban experiences. So what's the road ahead for us? Is it temporary or permanent? These are extraordinary times, and I think they call for extraordinary responses. And I don't think it's a time for planners to plan for people. I think it's time for planners to plan with people And I think that's an important distinction. And so people's perception and attachment to place is changing, and perhaps forever, as I said earlier. But decisions on where we go from here, I think, will be better made if we understand the role and how people are actively redefining their sense of place at this time. So I think looking around and seeing what communities are doing, seeing how people's preferences are changing, and seeing how we're inhabiting space now differently to 6 months ago. So to avoid a resurgence, I think, in an infection and to recover more equitably, cities must think more expansively about the kinds of outdoor every spaces that can fulfill people's daily needs, and really take this as an opportunity to work with communities most affected and the economic fallout. So let's use this opportunity as a chance to pose a question. And for me, that's about, can we really afford not to take this once in a generation opportunity to stop and reprioritize what matters the most to us and reshape cities for people first? If we don't take this opportunity to act now, I believe that the very things we value in terms of what makes our cities so much a part of our social fabric are fundamentally at risk. And the long-term resilience of cities and people can only be sustained if we work together to experiment and innovate at the place scale. And the sooner we can get back to scenes like this one in Bryant Park, the better, I think. COVID-19, it has been a devastating tragedy. There's no denying that. But there's also a really important opportunity here to build back a stronger sense of place and create vibrant outdoor spaces that celebrate urban public life as a result of our recovery plan. So this would be a small but significant silver lining. And just to finish, I wanted to finish with something a bit more upbeat. And here in, of course, Australia, we like to have somewhat of a sense of humor about things at some times. And I think the messaging and the communication of COVID and the distancing and all this is really important. And it's really important to maintain some levity in it as well, especially when things are so tragic around us. So to finish, I just wanted to finish out and to thank you and to just reference this quote from Michael Berkowitz of CityLab that says, we're going to get a whole new generation of infrastructure because of this pandemic, and we have to do it better than the last generation. I think that's our challenge in Malaysia. I definitely think that's our challenge, is to build back better. And I think it's one heck of an opportunity that we can all work on together.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So that's so much that you've shared that really, I hope Malaysian planners, if there are any local government representatives here, please take note, and also do let us have your questions. Some people are already putting in their questions on the public chat. We have a bit of a technical problem. Joanne, are you in?
Can you hear me, Jeppy?
Yes, we can hear you. So I don't know why your camera is off. Can you make sure that your camera is back on?
It says that media
Okay.
could not reach the server. But
Okay.
I have emailed you my slide to see if you can show my slide, and I'll talk over it.
Okay, so let me, so if you can just chat, I'm gonna basically, can you introduce yourself while I'm doing that, Joanne, and read your bio? Okay, thank you.
Okay, sure. Thanks for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Kebun Bangsa and Kebun Kerinci. My name is Joanne. I'm an urban designer and an architect registered in Australia. So I've been in Australia for over 10 years. I recently came back to Malaysia about 5 years ago, and I joined Think City, a community-based, organization. And from there, since late 2018, I've left Think City, and now I've been volunteering for 2 organizations. So basically YWCA KL, who provides a vocational school for underprivileged children, and also Club Kebun Banda, who actually manage 2 kebun community gardens. So it's Kebun Bangsa and Kebun Kerinci. So the last 2 years, I've been a lot on the background, doing a lot of the admin work, bookkeeping, finance, liaising with government, on behalf of the 2 community gardens. But because of COVID-19, I've started gardening a lot actually. So yeah, so my slides up. If you can go up to the first page.
Can you see it, Joanne?
Yeah, I can see it, but just start from the beginning. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I didn't realize this was slide 6.
Yes.
Okay. Is that all right?
Just before that, yeah.
Before?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So here we are. Just wanted to share what we've been doing with the two kabuns, and how it actually has provide some sort of relief to the COVID-19 pandemic. So next, please, Jatin. So I'm going to start with Kebun Bangsa first. Kebun Bangsa is huge. It's a 1 hectare piece of land under the TNB line. So this is only the middle portion of the garden. Like couldn't take the whole thing because it's just too long. Other than just a community farm, it's also an urban park. For visitors to visit, free of charge. Anyone can come. Can you move to the next slide with a bit more? Yep. So we've established since 2017. At Lorong Bukit Pantai Bangsa. But, we may have been operating for 3 years, but the planning and design started in 2013. The founder, together with a group of committee and residents, started this together. And it took them a long, long time for the government and the owner of the land, which is, TNB and Pejabat Tanah and DBKL, to actually come on board. But we were very lucky that, sort of at the end, we got the DBKL and other authorities to give us, allow us to use that piece of land, under the power transmission line. So at the moment, we have 50 active volunteers with, 200 to 300 other people that's interested. They come, to actually do gotong royong on the weekend. It's a very, a diverse, very, very diverse community garden. So the garden is actually operating only based on volunteers, and we only have 2 gardeners working, at the farm. So it's actually a knowledge ground on ecosystem and biophilic city. Like how human can actually coexist with nature's animals, and provide recreational and also knowledge in agriculture as well. So we operate, like I said, on people power. How do we actually cultivate a social system and the spirit of gotong royong, because it's not easy for people to want to do this with no money. Yeah, so that's a big thing for us. So other than the spirit of giving back, the kebun also is also a gathering space for different sort of communities, and a lot of children likes to come to our kebun to learn about animals. They come and pet our chickens, our turkey, sheep, cows. Next, please. So our project initiative, why do we do this? We started this to ensure that other than transferring knowledge on agriculture and permaculture, we also wanted to make sure that how can we actually secure the food supply. So on a weekly basis, the volunteers will come in and actually plant vegetable, harvest vegetable for different community in Kuala Lumpur that actually really needed the vegetable and the food supply. So these are a few of the organizations that we support: the Lighthouse Children Welfare Home Association, the Myanmar Refugee Group in Pudu, Pit Stop Community Cafe in downtown KL, and Food Not Bombs KL just came and joined us, because of COVID-19, because they realized that, instead of buying vegetable, come and plant your own vegetables, so then, they can actually continue to support, their street friends and cook for them and stuff. So next. Oh, sorry, I also forgot that, we are actually, the Kebun Bangsa, Think City actually gave a kickstarting fund to Kebun Bangsa. That's how we actually started. And we've been, since getting a lot of private donations, and, the people have been really, really great in supporting us to continue this initiative. Thank you. Just the next one. Okay, so you can see a picture of, like plenty of kids and families, just visiting. So like I said, it's not just a farm, it's also an urban park, where people come together on the weekend and visit. So this is actually pre-COVID, okay? So no face mask, no social distancing. Yeah, next. So, early 2020 has been very devastated that, the virus came, not just it has affected our physical health, it has also affected, a lot of other things, especially, our food supply chain, has been disrupted. Every Malaysian has gone through this, even I myself. And also what we don't realize is the mental health. What has it done to you or all of us? Everyone feels really, anxious about, am I going to get sick and stuff? So, and then I've got also a lot of friends that lose their job because of COVID. So, a lot of this, then lead to just the next page on how, Kebun Bangsa actually took up the challenge, quickly to actually provide emergency response, to the pandemic. Yeah. So, I've just put a few of, what happened during the lockdown. So the whole Malaysia was locked down in 18 March. So quickly, within a week, we have harvested, enough vegetable to provide to Lighthouse, because Lighthouse Children Welfare Home is the closest to us. And then, 27 March, people, we started to realize that, the underprivileged community needed food. So, we have then harvested vegetable to become, part of the emergency food package that was distributed in Petaling Jaya. And then when the food supply was disrupted, a lot of the vegetable vendors and the farm, they couldn't travel interstate to provide vegetable, to the market. And some of the wet markets are closed. So then they didn't know what to do with the vegetable. So then Kebun Bangsa became a ground for them to actually just, load your vegetable, and then we put it on social media, our group chat, to say, anyone, if you need vegetable, pick it up yourself. So, within less than 24 hours, the entire truckload of kangkong was gone. And, we were like, okay, that's good, we're doing something. Even the Maria Chin came and picked up, a lot of vegetable to be then distributed to the needy, in her constituency. And then, throughout the entire MCO, we've been supplying vegetable to Lighthouse. Even until today, we're still doing it. They have now come and started, the children have started adopting a plot where they grow their own vegetable together with, Food Not Bomb. And Pit Stop plot, we are continuously working on it as well. So next. So, Kebun Bangsa, is also on the news, like any other NGOs that has helped people. What I wanted to pull up is, it was quite interesting that YB Zurada came early June from KPKT, that she realized that urban farming legislation needs to be reformed. And I really do agree with her, because at the moment, DBKL does not have any legislation that supports urban farming. How can you not have that? We have so many urban farms in Kuala Lumpur, and a lot of people has also come and visited us and wanted to start, so really, really, if you're out there, the authorities, the government, please help us out. We really need your support. Next. Okay, so, like I said, spirit of giving back, Gotong Royong, this has been happening every Saturday and Sunday. Do come and visit us, and, you see a lot of people, of all ages, different walk of life, all work together. And because, Kebun Bangsa is like 1 hectare, so there's plenty of space to social distance if you are not comfortable with working with other people. Next. Okay, so other than providing, food security, what I also realized is during the pandemic, now is in the face of RMCO, people have started to come out again, and they are looking for meaningful activities, not just hanging around in a shopping mall anymore. So, we have a surge of volunteers. So many of them just suddenly came and said, we wanted to help. I said, fine, just, come on a weekend, and, there's plenty of work to do. So it's a great stress reliever. We transfer knowledge, they learn some new hobby. We also have plenty of space for social gathering, mostly organized by themselves. Kebun Bangsa don't really organize social gathering. So they just come, use our dining area, our open space. We were like, fine, as long as you and your family look after yourself, and then they bring a lot of children to actually visit and learn about animals, about planting, and yeah, next. So, I think that, it's a great way to allow the rakyat to come back, to bounce back, after the pandemic, just to ensure that we are mentally healthy. You may be physically healthy, but what if, you keep getting, anxiety and, getting scared and stuff. So, gardening is a good way to just take your mind off a little bit, and, just to know that you're actually helping someone by spending 3 hours, once a week, you're helping someone. So next. So other than Kebun Bangsa, we also have Kebun Kerinci. That's our sister kebun in Kampung Datuk Tata, Pantai Dalam. It was started about a year and a half ago, half a hectare along JPS River Reserve. So we have about 20 active volunteers, but Kebun Kerinci is a little bit different. The profile is different from Kebun Bangsa. So Kebun Kerinci was actually meant to build for the local residents in the area from the PPR flats. And, they've been using the kebun as a gathering space. They have been working on it for the last, almost 2 years. Also a permaculture garden, just like Kebun Bangsa. And we have been actively building up Kebun Kerinci, rather than just farming food. We are also trying to provide, some equipments to work, for a lifestyle. We've built a calisthenics gym at the end of Kebun Kerinci. And if you are, a fan, do come and use. It's free. And also the last 2 weeks, I've been building a pavilion, a waka for the kebun together with the local folks. We've been working on it every single day for the last 2 weeks. Yeah. Next. So I've quickly picked this up from the SDG, the 17 SDGs, and they just launched an action, 170 actions for 17 SDG to combat climate change. So, if you go to the next page. So I've actually quickly ran through it, and there's like at least 33 actions that's related to community farming. If you actually look at action number 108, sponsor and participate in the building, of an urban community garden, it's actually literally stated there. So I think, everyone should come, whether it's to Kebun Bangsa or your local kebun, just to, work on it, that will actually, you can actually help combat climate change. Next. So, everyone can participate. If you don't have a local kebun to participate, come and join our initiative. If you go next. These are some of the initiatives that you can contribute to. Come and do gotong royong every single Saturday and Sunday. Don't have to register. You just turn out at 9 o'clock and we'll be there for you. Donate for a good cause. You can either adopt a veggie patch, work on it yourself, and donate the vegetable to someone that needs it. Drop some change in our donation box, or even in a donation in kind is welcome. Also, to ensure that we help, combat the climate change, we do have organic waste compost bin for you to drop your your waste that you don't want, because that will then we will turn it to good soil for our vegetable. You can also organize a community workout for your friends and your family. Do come to our kebun. Thanks. So I'm going to leave you with this last line, from our founder, Nseksan. So he always said that, something similar to what John F. Kennedy said, it's not about trying to get ourselves to ask what what our country can do for us, but what you can do instead to contribute to our country and community. So I think, to curb this pandemic, also, in the future, all of us need to come together and do something. It's time to contribute to everyone, not just don't be selfish. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you very much, Yaping.
Oh, thank you. I think that one of the things that we would love to see, and I'm part of the Kebun Bangsa community, is that do come, but come via Grab or bicycle or public transport, because the immense parking is causing a lot of problems for the farm, and it's it gives fuel for people to want to close it down. And I feel that it's probably providing such an invaluable service or value to the community that it's a shame if its popularity is the reason why it's being closed down. So do be very sensitive to how you tread onto some of these urban farms, and what footprints that you leave. So with that, I'm going to open up to some of the questions that's come in. Thank you so much, Joanne. And so nice to see you again. You appeared. Maybe you planned it on purpose to not appear. So we have a question for Joanne from Town Planner Mahani, who says that is the farm on temporary occupancy license. Can you
Yeah.
explain?
So when we started Kebun Bangsa 3 years ago, we do have DBKL helping us get a TOL from TNB and Pejabat Tanah. But now we have recently in May, I have actually put in on behalf of Club Kebun Bandar, I have put in an application to Pejabat Tanah dan Galian Wilayah Persekutuan for a TOL. So I've been chasing them. They're still assessing it. So it's been 4 months and they're still assessing it. So let's hope that we get something positive back.
Yeah, and I think that some of the things that we are lacking in terms of having seen what Michael is doing, having seen what Placemaking X has been putting on, I think that the citizen advocacy needs to be ramped up in Malaysia. I think that what was really funny was the executive director Ethan Kent 2 days ago posted a picture of people in New York City dining out on the streets. And I started laughing because we've been doing it illegally for the last 30 years. I mean, the mamaks have taken over the roads, and there's nothing that Malaysians love to do than to sit drinking a cup of coffee, watching the football on another illegal big screen. And we've taken over car parks and roads. So I think that we've done it all our lives, but I think let's really kind of get ourselves organized and do this. So a question I want to ask Michael is that, what has been some of the citizen advocacies that have been going on in your community, Michael?
Yeah, so I'll just do on the, when Ethan posted the photos the other day, and there's a comment in the thing there about Melbourne doing the same. And all over the world, we are seeing people doing what's been inherently something that's happening in Asia for, on a different scale for, 50, 60 years. I think the difference in context, however, what's important to realize is that in these other countries, what's going to spur on a post-COVID recovery isn't deregulation and allowing food to take over streets. That's one thing. And so we often forget about the triangulation of these things. And there has to be more than one reason to sustain it. Now, where it's been really successful in Asia, of course, is because of these places, these things happen around transit and where people come out to work and different things. So the triangulation is already there, meaning you guys are further ahead. And I think with the rest of the world, what we're going to suffer with is this idea that one thing will save it. And so just my point is just on that need for the triangulation of uses and more than one thing to do in these spaces, I think is critical. In terms of the local the local community here, what's been interesting is people realize the limitations not only on the physical architecture of their housing, but the physicality of the public realm that surrounds their neighborhoods. And so citizens taking back that space has been quite prolific and interesting. But I think the first round of lockdown, people found it more of a kind of a novelty and had a very different approach to the second round of lockdown, where our friends in Melbourne have really, I think the mental health and well-being question has been really something that's amplified, and they've tried to do things, but I think somehow it just shows you, this was my point on the slide with the inequitable access to these spaces, is when you take something away, yes, of course you miss it more and you realize just how much it means to you, but when you never had it in the first place, I think there's a bigger equity problem there. And so what we're seeing in Australia is more citizen-based action to understand that equity and what to do about it. And I think too that you see it not just, in the global south, we've been seeing this kind of thing where people are like, oh, you need to have access to green space and health and well-being and all of this. When in the global south, people are looking around saying, well, actually, we don't have that at all. And so I'm hoping that out of this doesn't just come a really kind of generational precedent-setting use of public space for some, and not the rest. So I don't think we can forget about those that don't have access to these things, and I'm hoping that still remains a priority for us.
Thanks, Michael. Tuan Haji, I just wanted to ask, is there anything that's being done by MIP to look at the research of correlation between lack of space, lack of access to public spaces during the time of pandemic to a declining mental health?
It's not directly Jebeng, but we are looking at the crisis in a bigger picture. We have put some online surveys, but they're not directly linked to public space per se. But it's quite interesting. I'm just picking up from what Michael was saying just now. This is through our observation. We find that, for example, in Shah itself, we find more people cycling, enjoying the streets. People are also enjoying the parks. It's packed nowadays, even on weekdays. Yeah. So I'm just coming back to that public space in times of crisis. We need to make it better. The public space is basically free. So you don't have to put in extra money or capital to it. You can enjoy the streets, you can enjoy the parks, you can enjoy the back lanes, and you can enjoy the public spaces. And because that is when you're staying at home for 3 months, being able to go out, take a walk, enjoy the that would definitely help. But yes, I think one area that is looking good as plans. And like I said, from the very beginning, and as my parents have said, yes, we do look at in much more detailed manner, if you like, because it is definitely a game changer. We need to take that back, and it's not only the food chain, it's the lifestyle, it's the way of how we approach what we have always taken for granted, and incorporate technology and so on. So yes, Joanne, it's one area that we do need to do not only research but engage. And then I think public space is free, so we have to make sure that we take advantage of that. And then the other part is about streets itself being a public place and a public space. And the more public space that we can turn into public places, the better we will be, and the better we will enjoy our spaces.
Thank you so much. I would love to go on, but we've been told that we're going to be kicked out of this room in another 2 minutes. I'm sure there's tons to go on. I just want to then say that do look out for announcement of Placemaking Malaysia. We're going to start opening up for memberships. We have a few minor details to sort out. So do keep your eyes open for the launch of Placemaking Malaysia. We're very excited about that, and that's how we're going to maybe help you guys get yourself organized. We'll give you a voice and a platform to get organized. So thank you so much, Joanne, Michael, and Tuan Haji for your time. And we hope you all, wishing you all a good session for today and tomorrow and Wednesday. I'll see you again on Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock for another session to dialogue on SDGs. So have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.